Welcome to African Boss Leaders of Africa series, where we highlight good and bad leaders on the African continent. Today we're going to highlight Paul Kagame of Rwanda, the best president on the African continent without a doubt. But what makes him the best president in Africa? There will be 2 episodes to this biography because he's such a fascinating personality. In the first episode, we're going to look at his early life as a refugee, and in the second episode, we'll look at his unlikely and inspiring rise to power in Rwanda and to the pinnacle of African statesmanship. If it is your first time on this channel, please subscribe to African Boss and scroll around for some more videos and news about Africa that is informative and educational. We appreciate your support. Before we discuss and delve into the fascinating life of currently Africa's greatest president, let's discuss a little background on Rwanda, where he comes from. Rwanda is a landlocked East African country which is also known as the country of 1,000 hills, as it is elevated and dominated by mountains and sits along the Great Rift Valley. It has a population of about 13 million people, made up of 3 subgroups, which are the Hutus, who make up to 85% of the population, followed by the minority Tutsis, who make up to 14%, and the remaining 1% is made up of the often overlooked Twa, others call them pygmies. There is a disagreement by scholars on the origin and differences between the Hutus and Tutsis. Some scholars argue that they arrived separately into Rwanda from different locations, while others argue that they are actually one people who were divided by social casting. The main language spoken in Rwanda is Kinyarwanda, followed by French and English. For decades, the minority Tutsis were the caste that dominated Rwanda's politics and were supported by the Germans and later on the Belgian colonialists. The Tutsis were the ruling elite till the 1950s, when the majority Hutus overthrew the Tutsi monarchy, paradoxically supported by the colonial Belgium. Both the colonialists, initially the Germans, before they handed over power to the Belgians in 1917, made the divisions of the Tutsis and Hutus even sharper by introducing facial features to separate the 2 groups. The colonialists had all along supported the Tutsis in a divide and conquer method. Then we can see that the Belgians then turned against the Tutsi monarchy and assisted the majority Hutus to overthrow the minority Tutsi rule in 1959. This is purely looking out for their own interest. After that, ethnic violence broke out after the Tutsi monarch was overthrown. Hundreds of thousands of Tutsis had been driven out of Rwanda due to this conflict to the neighboring countries of the DRC, Burundi, Uganda, and Tanzania, further reducing the population of the minority Tutsis in Rwanda. Paul Kagame was born on October 1957 in a Tutsi family in Gatarama Prefecture in Rwanda, and he was the youngest of 4 sisters and 1 brother. Paul Kagame's parents were connected to the deposed royal family of Rudahigwi by blood. This family, remember, were overthrown in the late 1950s. Therefore, when Paul Kagame was 2 years old, his family fled their home, taking belongings only they could carry, and escaped to Mutara, Kagame's mother's birthplace near the Ugandan border. Most Rwandans escaped to border towns for security. It was further from the capital and closer to another country, easy enough to escape if need arose. For Paul Kagame's family, this situation happened in 1961 when they had to cross the border into Uganda. This then meant it was the start of the Kagame's life as refugees. By 1962, they had settled into a refugee camp called Shungezi in the Tori district of Uganda. By this time, Paul Kagame was 5 years old. As with many other African countries, the Rwandese refugees faced hardships including severe prejudice by the general Ugandan population. The Tutsis became laborers, mostly, for Ugandans, doing housework and gardening, and they got paid little for their work. So basically, they were reduced to manual labor. Paul Kagame attended primary school in the refugee camp, where he proved to be an excellent student and learned English as the curriculum in Rwanda was in French. We can see that today Mr. Kagame speaks very good English. Kagame was among the top 3 students in his primary school, which would mean automatic place in a government secondary school on full scholarship. However, the Ugandan government only sponsored its Ugandan citizens. Paul Kagame's father then, through his connections in Belgium, he was able to raise school fees for young Kagame to attend Ndale Secondary School. As Paul Kagame grew into his teens, his perception to the hardship faced by the Rwandans grew. He witnessed the rejection of Rwandans by their fellow Africans of Uganda to assimilate into their society. Most Rwandans who grew up in Uganda had to change their names to Ugandan-sounding names in order to go to better schools outside the camps and also to secure any jobs that they could find. This rejection fueled Paul Kagame's desire to one day return to Rwanda and perhaps started forming his philosophy to life. The death of his father, while Paul Kagame was still in secondary school, led to decline in academic performance and the feelings of rejection built up anger in the young Kagame. He would fight those students who belittled the Rwandese refugees. He was often suspended from school, and he had to complete his secondary education with a modest grade at Old Kampala Secondary School. On his return to West Uganda, Paul Kagame found his close friend that he had formed a close bond with since they were young from the refugee camp, Fred Ruguyemi. He had joined Yoweri Museveni's army as they were fighting the dictator Idi Amin. This would have a profound effect on Kagame and would later change his course in life. Thank you for listening. On the next episode, we'll continue to look at the fascinating life of this man who rose to power in the most unlikely circumstances. Thank you for joining us, and please do not forget to subscribe and then watch us again next episode in a couple of days' time. Thank you.